Hello, my friends. Welcome to Keswick Chapel The Chew. I'm Pastor Robert. This is day 3 of week 14 as we continue our journey together in the way, His and ours. This week we're looking at the way of Jesus as the way of resurrection. The foundational passage is in Matthew chapter 28, verses 1 through 10. I want to encourage you to read that. Today we're going to be looking at the way of Jesus as the way of Sabbath worship. Now, if you've missed any of the first two chews this week, I want to encourage you to go back and find them on the Facebook page for CFC and Church of the Nazarene, or on the YouTube channel, Keswick Chapel. So today, the way of Jesus is the way of Sabbath worship. The passage that I want you to look at is from Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 through 14. And let me set this up for you. Jesus and his disciples are walking through the fields of grain, and the disciples are hungry, and so they are pulling off the heads of wheat and eating them. And the Pharisees get all upset about that because they say it's not lawful for them to be pulling the heads of the wheat off on the Sabbath. It's work. Well, it wasn't work. If you were ever a little kid and you walked through a tall field of grass, you probably put your hand around one of those tall stalks as you walk by and kind of let your hand draw behind you, and you pulled the head of the grass off. That's what these disciples were essentially doing. It was no more laborious than that, and yet the Pharisees wanted to accuse them of violating the Sabbath. And then the next thing that happens is they're at the temple, and there's a man there with a shriveled up hand, and Jesus heals him. And the Pharisees get upset with that because it's unlawful to heal on the Sabbath. And Jesus says, well, wait a minute. If one of you has a sheep in a ditch on the Sabbath, are you going to leave him there till the next day? Of course not. You're going to pull him out. So what's right? And then he also uses a couple of examples from the Old Testament. The first being David and his companions. They ate the consecrated bread in the temple because they were hungry. It wasn't lawful for them to do that. And then the other thing Jesus pointed out was that the priests actually are guilty of violating the Sabbath because they're working on the Sabbath. So again, at every point, Jesus is reminding us that the spirit of the Sabbath is that the Sabbath was created for mankind, not for God. God set the example for us to rest. So when we look at Sabbath worship, what are we doing? We're coming together to rest, to be restored, rejuvenated, and to recuperate in our spirits with one another in community. And I want to turn your attention to a couple of passages. Acts chapter 2, verse 42, and then Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25. In both these cases, we see that we are being told first by Luke in Acts chapter 2, verse 42, says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer. So the new believers, the new disciples were coming together in community so that they could grow with one another, to help one another. And then they were living their lives together during the week. So they were living their lives together in community. Then they were coming together in corporate worship on Sunday and enjoying one another's company. So that's that one. And then in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25, we read this. Let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So the writer of Hebrews is telling us we need to make sure that we continue to meet together and that we continue to come together in community for the purposes of growing and learning and worshiping God together, because something really unique happens when we worship together. And so we know that Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath, and that Jesus' way is the way of Sabbath worship. So as you chew on these things today, I want you to think about this. We come together in order to worship God. God is the audience of our focused attention together in worship. At the same time, we are being energized by one another's testimonies, by our fellowship, by the praises that we sing to God, by the word that we hear proclaimed. It all works together to help us grow in grace. And this is a means of grace, being in corporate worship together. So I want you to chew on these things today, and I want you to consider Sabbath worship. How is it that you are allowing Sabbath worship to be a means of grace in your life to draw you closer to God. I pray that as you chew on these things today, you'll have eyes to see and ears to hear, a receptive heart and mind to God's truth, and that you will be transformed by the renewing of your mind as God conforms you and I into the likeness of Christ. Go in the peace of God, my friends. Blessings to you. Bye for now.